They're getting there. Does somebody have a participation trophy we could send across the way?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back to question period today, where it is obvious to everyone except the Liberals that the House of Cards is about to fall.
Let's get into it.
La communauté juive est si...
The Jewish community is being targeted in Montreal.
Alone. This is what's happened. A Montreal synagogue has been firebombed. A hate preacher has called for the extermination of Jews. Jewish students have been called the K word. Terrorists fired bullets at 2 different schools. And the UK Foreign Office has warned of likely terrorist attacks in Canada. We've all seen the Prime Minister's theatrical words, but what concrete steps has he taken this week to protect Jews and all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for that really important question. We condemn unequivocally the attempted firebombing, the shooting at 2 Jewish schools overnight last night in Montreal. There is no room and there is no place for anti-Semitism in Canada. There is no room, there is no place for hate. There is no room and there is no place for violence. Mr. Speaker, we condemn this unequivocally. We stand with Jewish Canadians across the country. The SPVM in Montreal is investigating, and we will continue to monitor this situation, call for calm, and ensure that Canadians are safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I find it interesting that the Liberal response to this type of activity is calm down, everybody. Yet, when you look at things like the Freedom Convoy, it's freeze bank accounts and arrest everybody. The hypocrisy on this is so blatant.
Well, yeah, because the Liberals don't want to be seen as anti-Islam, and they don't want to be seen as anti-Israel or anti-Palestine or anti-anything. So they're caught in the middle. They're caught in the middle and trapped by their ideology.
And that's it. And what do we say? You know, the more tolerant a society becomes, the more intolerant it becomes, and the more destructive it becomes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Les belles paroles ne vont pas protéger.
Fine words don't protect people. Real action is needed. Now, the scandal surrounding the Prime Minister's office continues to grow. We now know that this is similar in scope to the sponsorship scandal, but the president of the fund spent $200,000 of taxpayer money on their own business. Why did the Prime Minister not fire this person?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question, but Mr. Speaker, let me bring a bit of facts into the fairy tale of the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, from the moment that I learned that there was any allegations of wrongdoing, I demanded that there was a third-party investigation, Mr. Speaker. Upon receiving the report, Mr. Speaker, we demanded that there be corrective action at the management level and at the board level. Mr. Speaker, we expect the highest level of governance from any entity that receive money from the government of Canada.
If they expect the highest level, that bar is not very high. Look at everything. Look at their departments. There's scandals everywhere. There's money just siphoning out of this government.
There's so many scandals right now that we cannot keep on top of everything. We have not been able to do the deep dive into this sponsorship scandal because we've been so focused on the ArriveCan scandal. I cannot believe that this government just has scandal after scandal after scandal. I would be very, very surprised if this government makes it through the spring.
Yeah. We haven't talked about the Barnes scandal. We haven't talked about this scandal. And everybody, don't forget, the public inquiry is on the way. Like, we haven't even gotten to that.
Yeah, Justice Hoag's preliminary report is supposed to be due in February.
So there's just so much that is going on with this government, and the rot is just being exposed when you start peeling off all of these layers. So it's just something else. And when you have the head of the SDTC, which is the Sustainable Development Technology Canada, that is this organization that is supposed to be charged with distributing $1 billion in funds to green energy projects, and the head of that organization decided to give her own company $200,000. You can't make this stuff up. And then went on committee and said, "Oh, it's not a conflict of interest."
Like, these guys are just, they're so used to just doing whatever they want. They do not understand what a conflict of interest is.
Yeah. So the House of Cards it's coming down. It's just a matter of time. It's not going to happen before Christmas. I guarantee you it's going to happen in January, February.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And the Prime Minister have known for 6 months of the scandal brewing at their Green Slush Fund, a $1 billion fund that one of its own public servants compared to the sponsorship scandal and said there was money for nothing. Yesterday, Canadians learned that the chair of this fund directed $200,000 tax dollars to her own company. What? That minister has known that for 6 months. Why has this Liberal chair not been fired from this job?
I know. It's because it wasn't reported in the mainstream media. That's why. This is the pattern with this Liberal government. They know all of this stuff that goes on, and they don't seem to care about it at all until it hits mainstream media, and they have to answer for it. So it's the perpetual hand in the cookie jar thing with this government.
But I thought the Liberal government was going to be the most transparent government ever.
Well, maybe it's something to do with Trudeau's inability to understand what words mean. You know, he didn't understand the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Maybe he confused transparent and opaque.
Isn't he an English literature major?
Allegedly. Maybe he doesn't understand English either.
The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie le chef de l'opposition pour...
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. Let me bring some facts forward to the Leader of the Opposition story. The second we heard that there were allegations about managing that fund, I asked for an external investigation in order to shed light on the situation. On the basis of the results we obtained, I asked for corrective measures to be made. We expect the highest level of governance for agencies that manage taxpayer money, and we will continue to investigate.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 8 years, not only is the Prime Minister not worth the cost, he still does not have a climate plan. He said that if Canadians paid his carbon tax, it would save the world, but here are the facts. Canada now ranks 58th out of 63 in climate action. Canada is the only G7 country not to have reduced its emissions below 1990 levels. The Prime Minister has missed 7 of 8 of his targets over the last decade. And finally, according to a bombshell report by his own Environment Commissioner this week, he will not hit his 2030 Paris Accord targets. Mr. Speaker, why won't the Prime Minister just admit he doesn't have a climate plan, he has a tax plan?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition is saying in this House is factually incorrect. Facts. We have the best performance in terms of greenhouse gas reduction since 2019, Mr. Speaker. Fact. We have a plan that has been applauded by environmental organization, research organization, municipalities, even oil companies have applauded our climate plan, Mr. Speaker. And this morning in the Environmental Committee, the Commissioner to the Environment and Sustainable Development said that not only pollution pricing is working, but it is responsible for 30% of emission reduced in Canada since 2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Everyone, what happened in 2020.
Well, yeah, everybody was home because of COVID, so people weren't going on vacation, going to visit relatives, going to work. People were not driving.
Yeah, like they're taking credit because they locked everyone in their houses, and they're saying, "Oh, our climate plan is great." So your climate plan involves locking people in their house. It's like this is insane. It is just complete gaslighting. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. It's just completely insane.
Yeah, they manipulate the statistics to make the narrative positive for them. Meanwhile, they didn't do jack. It was everyone staying at home.
And then they say, "Oh, you know, the oil companies have applauded our plan." Yeah, I'm sure they have applauded your plan because they don't have to do anything. All they have to do is just charge more money. That's it. Easiest climate plan for them to implement. There's no effort. None of what you're doing is encouraging the oil companies to not produce more oil. None of what you're doing. This is the difference here. It is not a climate plan. Pierre, he's not being facetious when he says this. It's literally not a climate plan. It's a tax plan.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's funny that he keeps focusing on 2019 and the year that followed, because that year was the only year in which emissions went down because the economy was locked down, Mr. Speaker. In every other of the 8 years this Prime Minister has been in power, he has missed his emissions targets. He now ranks 58th out of 63 nations. He leads the only country in the G7 that has not reduced its emissions below 1990 levels. And his own environment commissioner says he will not hit his Paris targets. So, will they finally admit that after 8 years, this carbon tax is all pain and no gain?
And this is the weird thing about this Liberal government. All they seem to talk about is the environment, and yet they're doing so poor in their alleged quest to save the environment. So one might actually think, oh, well, maybe it's actually not about the environment.
It's not at all. It's the new boogeyman. It's the new thing that they're using to try to control Canadians.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, what the Leader of the Opposition is saying is still factually incorrect because we haven't missed any of our targets. The only target we have is for 2030. Canada has missed many targets because for 10 years, the Conservative Party did nothing to fight climate change. They did nothing to support clean energy. They did nothing to support electrification of transportation. They did nothing on adaptation, Mr. Speaker. That's why Canada's been missing our targets. This government, this Prime Minister, we will meet our targets. We're 85% to our 20 targets already, Mr. Speaker.
Are you still going on about things that the Harper government did or didn't do nearly a decade ago? If you guys haven't been able to fix it in 8 years, Harper's no longer the problem. It's you guys.
Yeah, Harper's been like sitting on a boat for the last 8 years. Or didn't you notice? You can't keep blaming the Conservative government. Now, when the Conservatives trounce your butts in the next election, the Conservatives will have a limited amount of time to blame the Liberals. So if they're in year 4 or 5 and everything is still horrendous and they're still blaming the Liberals, then they've run out of excuses as well. That's not going to fly. But you're 8 years in. You've had 8 years to fix this. And you're saying it's the Conservatives' fault that your climate plan hasn't been working and your climate plan hasn't reached the targets it's supposed to. Never mind the fact that at the beginning of your answer, you said we've hit all of our targets. And then you said immediately following that, well, the reason why we haven't been able to hit our targets is because of the Conservatives. Nice try, Guilbeault. Your answers are about as neat as your hair.
Speaker, I campaigned on a revenue negative carbon tax. This government's environmental plan is revenue positive and a mishmash of taxes and regulations which is dragging the Canadian economy down. Emissions still haven't risen to pre-pandemic highs, and that's because the economy still hasn't recovered. Per capita GDP and productivity are lower this year than in 2017. After 8 years, will the government admit that its environmental plan isn't working, its economic plan isn't working, with productivity and per capita GDP lower today than 6 years ago?
I don't think the Liberals are going to be too happy because they're using facts. And facts don't care about your feelings.
No, they don't.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from these conservatives, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I'm surprised about, not only do they not have a climate plan, they don't even have an economic plan, Mr. Speaker. Their only plan is to cut services, cut investment, cut programs in Canada. Mr. Speaker, I have some piece of good news for you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the OECD ranked Canada third in the world for foreign investment attraction, Mr. Speaker. Our plan is working. We're creating prosperity. We're creating jobs. We're building Canada of the 21st century.
The Chihuahua's barking again. I legitimately thought that Cypher had spliced in a old clip into our recent footage because I was like, I've seen this before. Is this an old clip?
We will take no lessons from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. If you've had that on your bingo card, please mark it off. Holy moly, man.
Like these guys are so predictable. I legit thought it was the same clip.
Yeah, and then he just starts yelling.
Bark, 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 bark.
Notice that he didn't address anything about the facts.
Of course not.
Nothing. Like, oh, the OECD ranked us third in a foreign investment.
You do a really good job with that.
Congrats. Congrats. Like, go back into your doghouse.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
They can huff and they can puff, but their carbon tax house is falling down because it was built on two pillars which have completely collapsed. The first, that it is revenue neutral. Well, the Prime Minister's own budget watchdog has said that Canadians pay far more in the tax than anything they hope to receive. The second is that it would allow the government to hit their own emissions targets. Well, the Liberal-appointed Environment Commissioner confirmed this week that they have no hope of hitting their targets even with the carbon tax. So after 8 years of failure, will the Prime Minister put his ego aside, admit he has a tax plan, not an environmental plan?
Right? The whole thing that we were told about the carbon tax is that you're going to get more money back than you actually put in.
But we knew that's not true because that's not how taxes work.
Yeah, that's not how math works. Like, it's just not how it works. And the Parliamentary Budget Office has said that 80% of Canadians are actually getting less back.
And this is the Liberal Parliamentary Budget Office. This is not the Conservatives. So even their own people are admitting that this is flawed.
Right. So first it was revenue neutral. Now you're making a profit. And then you're saying, oh, but we're going to use those funds to invest in green projects. Like, just stop. Nobody believes you. Nobody. Not even your own party believes you.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, we're getting there. We're 85% of the way to meeting our 2030 targets.
Oh, Guilbeault.
Cypher, do you think you could do your job going, oh, well, you know, we're getting there?
Like, you're doing...
It's been 8 years.
You're doing terrible. And like, well, we're getting there.
It's been 8 years, but we're getting there.
Like, what?
Give me a break.
This is Clown Town. Clown Town. But this is what happens when your entire government is failing in literally every category. Every category. You have guys standing up saying, well, you know, we're getting there. Where? Where are you getting to?
Rock bottom.
The Honourable Minister from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are getting there. We're 85% of meeting our 2030 targets. But do you know what's worse than not even trying? Is not even being willing to admit that climate change exists. Last week, the leader of the opposition was asked in a scrum right over there if he would meet the Paris target. And he was like a deer in front of headlights, Mr. Speaker. He couldn't even answer the question as to whether or not Canada would meet our Paris target. He wouldn't even answer the question. On this side of the House, we are doing everything we can to achieve our 2030 targets, as opposed to the Conservative Party who want to bring us back to the Stone Age, Mr. Speaker.
They keep saying this, bring us back to the Stone Age. Pretty sure the air was a lot cleaner back in the Stone Age, so that's probably a compliment to the Conservatives. But at the same time, okay, so Pierre was asked, are we going to hit our 2030 targets? And his response would probably be, well, not if the Liberals keep staying in power. That's for darn sure.
Well, that's the thing. How is Pierre supposed to know the specifics and the numbers if he's not in office?
Right.
And the Liberals, I mean, they're just manipulating statistics to their will, so who knows even if what they're saying is true.
And why would Pierre tell everybody, well, this is what we're going to do in order to hit the targets when he's not in office? They keep trying to get him to reveal his election platform before the election even begins. So that's not going to happen. And for everybody that's kind of listening in, you're probably going to hear this a little bit more as we get into the next couple of months. When there's specific questions asked about platform and policy, Pierre is probably going to be saying less and less and less, not because he doesn't have an answer, but because he knows an election is probably right around the corner, and he doesn't want to give all of this up so that the Liberals can start putting together a counter for it.
Well, and as our MP said during a discussion that we had with him, he said, you know, we don't want to reveal the platform now because the Liberals are going to steal the good parts of it and then say that the rest of it is a horrible idea.
Right?
So why would you give your opponent ammunition like that?
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
His own government has admitted that they're not going to hit those targets, Mr. Speaker. And they're getting there. Does somebody have a participation trophy we could send across the way? Maybe they would get there faster if they stopped saying no to clean energy projects, like when they killed a tidal electricity project in Atlantic Canada that would have created zero emissions power for Canadians, or when they say no to nuclear, when they say no to carbon capture. There were 18 LNG terminals on the books when this Prime Minister took office. 0 have been completed. So instead of canceling clean energy projects, why don't they cancel their carbon tax?
Mr. Scheer, spitting facts. Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, we'll work on a participation trophy for you, Guilbeault, because that's all you're going to leave office with. Because your legacy is really nothing in the environment, aside from putting a whole bunch of Canadians in the food bank line. That's what your legacy is going to be. Congrats. I hope you're proud of it. And for those of you wondering, LNG is liquefaction of natural gas. That's what LNG stands for. So there's all of these plants that had permits waiting on the Prime Minister's desk, and he has approved none of them. Why is he not greenlighting carbon capture projects? Why is he not greenlighting nuclear? Pretty much the cleanest and most efficient energy source that we have right now.
You know, the problem with nuclear, and it's not even a problem with nuclear itself, it's just the problem is the perception. You have incidents like Chernobyl back in the 80s or 3 Mile Island, which wasn't even a meltdown, and it's got everybody scared. The fact is that Canadian CANDU reactors are the safest in the world, and not only that, but they can burn the fuel that other nuclear reactors would treat as waste. So waste comes out of, nuclear plant A, and CANDU reactors are able to use that as fuel.
Right.
They're the best in the world. And why are we not building them?
That's the magical question, folks. For a government that is so green focused, why are you not building literally the most abundant energy source that can work all year round and fuel our energy grid of the future? That's the magical question here. Why? Because they'd rather tax Canadians, put us in the poorhouse, so they can focus on scandals that make them rich.
Hey, how many nuclear plants do you think that they could build using that $54 million that they wasted on the Arrive scam app?
Well, they could build part of one, that's for darn sure. And, but I bet they could build a full one with $1 billion that they gave to that SDTC that doesn't seem interested in funding green energy projects. They just seem interested in lining their pockets.